Good morning, everybody. How are we doing? Happy Friday. This is Jeremiah. We are going to have a really fun little webinar here. Hope you're ready. Talking about those CAD standards, which we all know and love, right? Some people love them more than we should. I don't know. But, it's just you have your certain look, obviously. Everyone has that certain look. Style. I mean, I remember back in the day, I had my favorite way of drawing a arrow, learning how to draft ink on Mylar. I really liked this certain style, picked it up from an architect buddy of my dad's. It just had the arrow loop was just on one side. I loved that look of that one-sided arrow. Loved drawing that on valve callouts. Um, and you get that. You get your little preferences of how you like things. And then as we move to CAD, we call those CAD standards, just enforcing that look. And yes, land effects can absolutely support that. It was always engineered that way so that all that content of the text styles and the arrows and the blocks and all that can certainly be customized, and then we store all of that in what we call a preference set so that it just simply enforces your certain look, get exactly the look that you want. So if that sounds kind of exciting, kind of what you are in for, then you are in the right room. That is what we're talking about today. I just have a super quick housekeeping item, and that's just mainly regarding that Q&A button at the bottom. Go ahead and press that now, I would recommend, and that's going to make it a little quicker for you to type any questions to us so that you can get your answers, because you are with us on this ride live in person. So you're welcome to ask questions as we go along, and you'll be able to see the answers that I typed to other people. So it makes a great little companion while you're watching this. And we are recording this, so it'll be up on the website later. So you'll be able to revisit it because we're going to cover some really cool stuff. But James has a lot to cover, so I'm going to get this passed over to him and we'll get going.
Good morning. Thanks for the intro, Jer. I think that you made some really good points there about likening it back to the days of hand drafting. As you guys might know, CAD standards is a pretty broad topic. It kind of touches everything. And let's jump right in. This is me. I'm part of the content creation team, the manufacturer relations team, and the video production team here at Land Effects. And I don't think we need to waste too much time on me. Let's get right into the good stuff. Before we get too far in, let's just quickly do an outline of what we're going to look at today and kind of the order in which we're going to approach it. We're going to start with a brief recap. This is a topic that we've covered before in many different ways. We actually have multiple webinars on it. We have many power tips, and we have really good step-by-step documentation on any topic related to today that's going to go into great detail. So if you have a specific question that we don't get to touch on today, it's really easy to just search your question in our website and get literally step-by-step instructions that can walk you through it. So we'll be taking a look at what makes a good standard. We've done a webinar on kind of CAD standard theory, what makes a good standard and what separates a good one from a bad one and that sort of thing. And then we're going to also look at how AutoCAD defines a CAD standard and how a CAD standard in Land Effects really goes far beyond what just AutoCAD defines an AutoCAD standard as. I thought that this cartoon was kind of relevant. I think that it goes back to what Jared said. Everyone has their own preferences, and there's no one standard to rule them all. You might have a standard that works really well for you, but might not work great for another office. And if you can have any key takeaways from today, I would like one of them to be, if you have the luxury of being able to use our default standards, we here at Land Effects have all been those people sitting at the table, and we have some really good people here that have ironed out a really good default standard. So if you have the luxury of being able to just run with defaults, you're not going to have to deal with a lot of the issues that we're dealing with today. But I understand most of you guys have your own standards that you want to implement, and that's what we're here to talk about. Some topics that we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about things like leaders, text, blocks, hatches, layers, CTB settings, and some other tools that you can use to do some of the heavy lifting like BatchMan. And today's approach is going to be a little bit different than webinars we've done in the past, because we're really going to focus on a specific plan, a really simple one, albeit, and how you can go through step by step and methodically make that plan adhere to your standards. So we're not going to be spending too much time in the weeds of theory and what makes a good standard. We're going to try to just get into CAD as quick as we can and start working through some of these things. Now, I understand that your standard is probably nothing like the one that I've chosen to show off today. But all of the things that we're going to show are going to serve as a starting point for you to be able to implement your own. So with a brief recap, let's quickly talk about what makes a good standard. First and foremost is legibility. There's nothing worse than getting a plan that just looks like a plate of spaghetti. How easy is your plan to read? You want to be able to quickly interpret it and have it be pleasing so that it's not hard to decipher what's on the page. Second, is your CAD standard efficient? Does it lend itself to efficiency? Does it foster accuracy and consistency? Accuracy and consistency are going to be two things that really that really work together. So you don't want to be changing your plan frequently or your CAD standards frequently. If you're always updating and changing them, then nobody can have the chance to get used to them. So the more consistent you are with your standard, the more chance you have to build accuracy. And when your plan is, or your CAD standards are consistent, you can quickly find flaws, outliers, anomalies, things like that, and that's going to increase your accuracy. Does your plan have a short learning curve? If you have a new hire, can they pick it up quickly? And can someone in another discipline or another office quickly pick up your standard as well? And that kind of leads us into the next topic of adaptability. If you're sending plans out to another office and they need to make your standards adhere to their standards, or vice versa, let's say you have a client that regularly sends you stuff with their strict standard, how easy can you adapt? Can you conform your standard to meet theirs, or vice versa? Can you make their standard easily adhere with yours? So these are kind of the quick bullet points of what's going to make a good CAD standard and what we're trying to go for today. Moving on, AutoCAD. They define a CAD standard as a set of common properties for named objects such as layers and textiles. If you keep reading, they go on to mention layers, textiles, line types, and dimension styles. Now, these are all very core elements of a CAD standard, but it's not the whole story. A CAD standard, especially when using land effects, can go far beyond that. We're going to also be talking about things such as preferences, blocks, hatches, plot settings, leader types, everything I have listed here. And there's so much that we can't possibly cover them all in detail. So we might not have a chance to touch on all these, but like I said previously, we have in the past, and we have plenty of content on all of these things. So if you have a specific question, feel free to throw it in the chat and have your question answered, or maybe we can point you in the direction of a resource that will give you all the answers you need. Some topics to cover. We've mentioned a lot of them already. We're going to be talking about CAD settings. We want to understand our preference sets, because that's really going to be the core of our standards. Most things are going to point back to your preference set. Everything that we mentioned previously, layers, text, leaders, all of that is going to be able to be managed through your preference set. And then there's also the questions of custom content. How do I use my own blocks? How do I use my own layers? How do I use my own line weights? And most things that we're going to be talking about today, you're going to have the option to use the defaults, modify the defaults, or use your own custom stuff. And we're going to show you how to do all of that. And then today's approach. Like I said, we're going to be focused on CAD. We're not going to be focused too much on the theory behind things. So we're going to be looking at a plan here. And the plan on the top has some really basic default settings. And then you have a quick print preview of that plan below. And we're going to be going through and changing pretty much everything in this plan so that it has a completely different look. And one cool thing is your print preview should look very similar, if not better or more to your taste. So we're going to get into how all of that is interconnected and how everything is laid out. We'll be taking a look at leader types, our plant leaders here. In this case, they're M leaders, and we'll be changing them completely. Every aspect of them, we'll show you how to change. We'll be looking at text uh, and show you how easy it is to update and change text, both in things like schedules and leaders. We'll be looking at blocks and plant symbols and how you can modify them, use your own, or just stick with defaults if you'd prefer. We'll be talking about layers, and layers are really a rabbit hole of their own. So we're going to kind of keep it simple with layers, not to get too far into the weeds. But we will talk about how they also impact your plot settings and how you can quickly, or not quickly, but how you can accurately change your layers and still maintain plot settings that are not going to be haywire. And then towards the end, we're going to be talking about BatchMan. BatchMan is a very powerful tool that can do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. So if you spend this time to get your preference set and your CAD standards all set on a single drawing, BatchMan is able to do a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to applying those changes to a bulk amount of drawings. It doesn't have to be bulk. You could apply it to one other drawing, but essentially what it's going to do is save you the time and effort of having to open each drawing that you want to update and having to do all the changes manually. So before we hop into CAD, do we have any initial questions?
No, we're good. Let's move right on.
Sweet, let's get into it. All right, so here we go. This should look familiar. It was just shown in the slideshow. We have an example plan here. It's nice and simple, but it's got all of the elements that we want to look at today. And I named this drawing standard preference set because I created this using a fairly standard imperial preference set. And then I have a drawing here, which is the same plan with a new CAD standard applied. So this one I have called modified preference set. And so what we're going to do is we're going to work through this step by step and try to go from point A to point B. So before I jump into all that, let me close these drawings here, just so we have the one working drawing. Okay, so here we go, CAD standards drawing. This is the one we're going to work with. To begin, what we want to look at is our general preferences. You'll notice here in the FX admin tab, we have this button that's called general. This will open your preferences. And we want to get familiar with this dialog box because this is going to be our home base in many ways. If you look up here at the top, we've got various tabs that allow us to control the preferences related to each. And if we go ahead and close out, these will correspond to our site ribbon tabs, our planting ribbon tabs. In most of these ribbons, you'll have a specific option here to open the preferences for that ribbon. So if you open the planting one, it's going to take you to that same dialog box. It's just going to open up your planting tab and have that active. So you can really access your preferences from a lot of different areas, which makes it really convenient because if you're working on planting and you're on that ribbon using those tools, you can quickly open straight to the planting tab of the preferences dialog box. So what we want to take a look at first is our leaders, specifically these plant callouts here. I've got a few of them on the plan, as you can see, and what we want to do is change those. So we'll go over here to our planting tab of our preferences, and you'll see on the right we have this box that says plant label. This is going to allow you to change your label type. So if I just go ahead and click on it, it's going to bring up options for me. And you can see here in the callouts options, I've got blocks or M leaders. I'm going to be working with M leaders today because they offer many advantages. As we get into editing things later, like blocks, some of this backend stuff will make a little more sense, but ultimately M leaders are a single item. Whereas the blocks, if you use the block callouts, there's actually a left and a right version. So one advantage to using M leaders is that if you edit anything, you only have to modify it in a single spot. You don't have to modify both versions of it. Another advantage of M leaders is, unlike blocks, they can have multiple insertion points. So they're much more easy to move around and work with on the plan. And M leaders are also all one entity. So the callout box, the leader, the arrow, it's all one thing. So when you're working with them in your plan, it's actually gonna have many advantages over the block callouts. So for today's example, that's what we're gonna stick with. So you can see here in model space, if you look at any of my plant callouts, you'll see that I just have a specific set style. And if you want to change it, you can just choose from any of these defaults here. So let's say we wanted to change to the hexagon style. It's as easy as selecting it and then clicking OK. Now you can see our plant label box is changed to give us a preview of the new one. We can change the landing distance. So this is going to change the behavior of our plant callouts, and the landing distance is the distance between the callout itself and where you click to place it. So you can set that to be fixed, but to have more control over things today, we're going to keep it at manual. And then we also are able to change our arrow types. So you can see uh, the ones that I have that are existing are standard arrows. Let's say we want to change them to a dot style. It's as easy as just clicking that, and then it'll apply that change for us. Now, before we go ahead and we start applying these changes, what we want to make sure is that we are on the correct preference set, because if I just start making changes to all of this and saving them, it's going to make those changes for this preference set. So right now I have this Imperial Standard preference set active, and what I don't want to do is change these settings for this preference set. So what we can do is we can create a new preference set and we can say manage. And here I have the option to delete a preference set or make a new one. And then I can also give permissions to this preference set. So what we're going to do is we're going to say new, and we're going to create a new preference set that's going to have Imperial Standard settings as our starting point. So if I say new Office Standard, we'll create a new preference set that's called new Office Standard. So let's go ahead and do that. And now you'll see I have my active preference set as the new Office Standard. I can use this drop-down box menu to switch between any preference set that I'd like. So that's going to be very important, because you don't want to go mucking around with a preference set that you are not intending to change. So now that we've got that out of the way, let's go ahead and make our plant callout changes. So let's go with the hexagon style. We're going to leave it at manual, and then we want the dot. Now, when I say OK, it's not going to immediately update. That's because these M leaders will not update on the fly. So what we're just going to do really quick, because I don't have many of them, is we're just going to delete these and replace them. So this is important, because if you're starting a new drawing, you're going to want to make sure that you have your preference set, the correct preference set active, so that you don't have to replace these things. So if I just take my plant label tool here, I can quickly place with one click. And then here is where we have the manual setting that we chose. And now you can see it places with the new style. So I can go ahead and quickly just snap all of my new labels right into place here. And let's go ahead and do these. And we'll get these guys going. And you can do it with group labels too. So if you want to do a group, it's easy enough to just choose the group label option. It's going to ask you to choose a sample of the plant in the group. You can go ahead and choose it. Then it's going to ask you to specify the area of the group. Go ahead and drag your window over the plants you want. And then it's going to allow you to place the first leader and then all of the subsequent leaders as well. So even though we had to replace them, working with labels is really easy. So now you can see our callouts have the new settings. We've got our dot, and we've got our hexagon style, and we have the new look in place. Now, you might want to know how you can change your text, and that's going to be really easy as well. So if we come back to our preferences, it doesn't matter which area we come back to. If we come to our general tab, we can see here that we have this text style. This is going to be the first place that you want to make all of your text style changes. So you can see here, this is going to give us options of what text we want to change, and then we're able to edit them. Now, again, just like everything we talked about with the plant callouts, you want to make sure that you're on your correct preference set. So always keep this in mind. So if we wanted to change the text in our plant callouts, it's as easy as choosing the plant callout option and then clicking the edit button, and it's going to bring up our text manager for this plant callout. So if we wanted to, we could easily change the style of the font. So let's say we wanted to make this one City Blueprint. We could change it, and it's going to show us a preview. And let's say that we wanted to change the size. Maybe we wanted to make these a bit smaller, maybe only 8 point. When we go ahead and click OK, it's going to make those changes on the fly. So if you look at one of these plant callouts now, as soon as I hit OK, it's going to go ahead and update those. So if I zoom in here a little bit, you can see that it's now updated to the new text style. The beauty of this is now that this is in our preference set, if we were to open a new drawing and select this preference set and start working, these settings would already be in place. So you're not going to have to do this every time you start a new drawing. All you have to do is select the correct preference set, and then you can just start working. You're off to the races in that sense. But we can also work with other text in the drawing. So if you take a look at our schedule, we've got two types of text up here. We've got our schedule title, which you can see here in the list, and we also have our schedule text. So we're really able to modify every little aspect of the text in our drawing. So if I go ahead and I edit the title, I can choose a new font, just like we did with the plant callouts. Maybe I want to call this one, I want it to be architect text. And maybe I want this to be a bit bigger. We'll make this one, I don't know, 22. And then you can see our preview here. And if you look up here in model space where the schedule title is, all you have to do is say OK, and it's going to update for us on the fly. And again, just like the other text, if we start a new drawing and we have this preference set going, it's going to immediately implement that text style. So we can also quickly change the text within the body of the schedule by changing our schedule text option. And here, let's say we want to call this one, I don't know, avant-garde, and we want to make it also a little bit bigger, maybe 12 point. Again, as soon as I say OK, it's going to implement that change for us right away. Now, because we're working on this current drawing, we're seeing these changes take place immediately. If you load this preference set, our new office standard, and you open a drawing that was created in a different preference set, you might not see the text changes right away, and that's okay. As long as you have the correct preference set active, you can use the read command by typing REAT, and when you hit enter, it's going to go through and update all of your texts. Now, when I just ran the command, it didn't show up because we're in the active drawing, so the changes are already made for us. So that's how you're going to deal with your text, manage your text at a preference set level. Now, if you look here at the site tab, we also have our text manager tool here. And this is going to be more geared towards working with text on the fly. So if you get a drawing in that's got text that you don't have, or fonts that you don't have, you can easily change the settings or the style of the text on the fly using the text manager tool. So if you open up the text manager tool, you'll see here we have the ability to edit all of our text as well. Just to kind of show you an example, let's say we wanted to change our maybe our schedule title really quick, and we wanted to pick a new font. Just any of these, Arial would be fine. This will allow you then to change the style of text to mtext or text. So if I chose mtext, it's going to say, it's going to ask us if we want to update it, and we can say yes. And because we chose that mtext option, if you look at the command line down here, it's asking us to place a text box. So as soon as we do our first click, it's going to update the text, and then we can just exit out of this text box command if we just wanted to update it, or we could leave the text box going and type something new there. So the text manager is good for changing things on the fly, but if you want to make more global changes to your standard at a preference set level, it's better if you do all of that through your preference set here. So managing your text at the preference set level is probably the way to go, especially if you're going to be starting a new drawing going forward. And you're going to be able to have the most control of the style, because as long as you load the correct preference set, then you don't have to think about it. You can just start working with it. Before we move on to anything else, do we have any questions about leaders or about working with text?
No, no, we're good. We did have a question about, the unfortunateness of, changing those M leaders that we can't affect every possible change to already placed labels. But that's it's the nature, unfortunately, of how M leaders work. But once you get your standards set, you're set for the future. And that's the important part.
Yeah. And also the labeling tools make it really quick to replace them. So on big plans, it might be more of a hassle, but if you need to, it's really not that big of a deal at the end of the day. Um, all right, so let's move on to talking about blocks and adding our own custom content or modifying existing content. So the first thing to think about here is let's take a look at our planting symbols. You can see here I've got a couple types of trees. And in this example, all of my plants here have data tied to them. So if you have symbols that you've used that are our default symbols and you like it, but it's just not quite right, you want to change something small about it, it's really easy to update that. So I'm going to go ahead and open my properties tab here by typing properties. And I'm going to select one of these tree symbols that I have. So let's say you really like this, but you wish it had some more lines or something simple about it. You just wanted to make a minor change. If you select the block, you can see here that we have it shows its name. And our naming convention is really cool because it makes it really easy to find blocks and make sure you select the right one and all of that stuff. So this block's name is LAFX tree simp, which stands for simple, and then it's number 152. So if you wanted to make a change to this block, one easy way to do it would be to change the source file. So if you take a look at the name here, you can find out where that block lives. So if I close CAD or minimize it, and I come here to wherever my land effects folder lives, in my case, it's on my local disk. I can open land effects here, and I can now, based on the plant name, find my way to where that source file is. So if I come into my blocks folder and I go into my graphics tab, this is where my planting symbols live. I can go into planting and then trees and then simple corresponds here. And if I scroll down, now I'm just looking for the number that that block is, and it is 152. So if I open this source DWG file for this block, I can make changes here. And I have already made a change here because I was practicing this beforehand. But let's say you wanted to add these 3 lines, you would just use your polyline command and then put them in however you wanted. And because I have layer 0 active, I'm just going to go ahead and use match properties to make those land on the same layer as this one. So let's say now this block is exactly how you wanted it. It was almost the same, but you just wanted to make some little tweaks. All you have to do then is save this block in that same file location where it lived with the same name. And now we have the new version of the block saved. Now, if I come over here to my plan, you'll see that, sorry, let me close that one. Now, if I come over here to my plan, you'll see that it still looks like the old block. This is a really cool command that we have. It's called redefine block. So you can just type redefine block in the command line and follow the prompts. So it's asking you to select the block that you want to redefine. And now it's going to update that in every instance of the drawing or of that block in my plan. And the way this works is really cool because instead of having this block placed multiple times throughout my drawing, what the system is doing is it's placing the block and defining it once within this drawing, and then every other instance is just a copy. This allows the system to be more efficient and to decrease your file size. So you might be familiar with having one master drawing with hundreds of symbols in it, and then you're copying and you're pasting your symbols in. That's pretty antiquated by today's standards. And if you want to get the most performance out of FXCAD, then we highly recommend that you take the time to get away from that and start incorporating your symbols in with ours. And there's a couple of ways to do that. So I just showed you how you can modify one of our source blocks to change it. One more thing to note on that is our blocks are all cloud-based. So if you were to go back into your blocks folder for any reason and delete this, then next time you place it on the CAD side, it's going to download the block again, and you're going to be back to the default. So if I deleted this from here and then I replaced the symbol on the CAD side, it's going to go back to the version that I didn't modify because it's just going to pull it from the cloud. So that is one thing to be aware of if you modify R blocks. So you can also save your own blocks in or use these and turn them into your own blocks by giving them unique names, and then you don't have that issue. So one way you might want to add a custom block, let's say you wanted to add a site block here. You could, in theory, open up your master drawing and take all of those blocks within that master drawing and save them out as individual DWGs. And then you could come in here to your file paths, the appropriate file paths. They're not all going to be planting blocks. If I come back here to my blocks folder, I could come in here and I could add all of my site amenities. I could add my plan graphics, and I have all these subcategories here, and I could integrate my blocks that way. I could save them all as individual DWGs and put them in here with my own names, and they're gonna integrate with the land effects blocks. But let's say you don't want to do that yet, but you've already copied it and pasted one in. So let's say here I have a group of line work. This could also be a block if it was blocked in my other drawing. And I just quickly want to add this to my blocks. I could select all of the line work or the block depending on what case you have. And if you come over here to our site tool and you click the drop down from our blocks, we have our save block tool. This is a really cool tool because it allows you to save a block in on the fly. So I can go ahead and click the save block tool and then follow the prompts in the command line. And what this is going to ask me to do first is select my insertion point, which we'll say in the middle. And then it's going to ask me to save the block with a name and ask me where I want to put it. So you'll notice that these folders here are the same folders that we had in our land effects folder. So if you go to blocks, these are going to be the same thing. So you're just doing it on the fly. So let's say I want to go into my plan graphics and I want to put this in my site furnishings because it's a bench, and I want to put it in my benches. I can now just put it in there with my new name, and I could say like my bench. So now if I give it a name and I save it, it's going to ask me to give it some properties. I can leave it with its scale at 1:1 in the inches it was drawn, but I can also say maybe I want this one to manually scale. And same with my rotation. I can have it have no rotation, so just places the way it was drawn, or I could prompt it to have manual rotation. So if I say okay, now that block is going to be saved into my system with those settings. So if I come over here to my plan, let's say I wanted to replace these half round benches, I can go ahead and delete them so they're not in my way. And when I navigate through my block tool, I can come up here to my plan graphics. I can go to site furnishings and I can go to my benches. And if I scroll down, it's going to be right here called my bench. Now, before I place this, I just want to show you how this corresponds to the file path. So whether you're working with a block, a hatch, a plant symbol, knowing where the source files are in your land effects folder is going to be important so that you can easily integrate them. So let's go back over here to CAD. Oops, I got my menus popping up. I'm struggling here. Okay, let's go ahead and navigate to the block. Again, we saved it under plan graphics, site furnishings, benches, and it's going to populate down here at the bottom. And now when we place this block, it'll ask us to give it a position based on its insertion point. And then as I move my mouse, because we set it to manually scale, I'm going to have control over how big it is. And then same with the rotation. I can rotate it depending on how I want. Now, this is a round bench, so it's going to look basically the same either way. But now I can go ahead and place my custom bench as many times as I want. So whether you're editing a block that is an existing block or you're saving one into the system that's your own, the process is going to be sort of similar. You need to have an idea of where that source file lives. But let's say you also wanted to integrate a large number of blocks. That's also pretty easy. If you go ahead and you go to your folder, your land effects folder here, you go into blocks, and let's say we wanted to add a few blocks. Let's say we wanted to add some new trees. So I could come into my graphics tab, I could go to planting, and I could go to my trees. I could integrate my blocks in the same manner by putting all my simple trees and then all my evergreen trees in and so on, and make them fit right in with the land effects. But if I wanted to add a new section, I can just put a whole new folder in here. So I have some trees here on my desktop in this folder. If I open it, you can see I've got a number of trees in here. And these are still all individual DWGs. These aren't all in one master drawing. So you're still gonna have to split them out of a master drawing into their individual drawings. But I can take this folder now and I can drag it in to add a new category. So now when I'm going through the system, I'll be able to see all of the existing land effects categories, but I can also now have my custom trees section. And we'll go ahead and show you what that looks like on the CAD side here. So if I wanted to add a new tree, I could come over here to planting. I can open my plant manager and I can go and pick a new tree. We'll just pick one here at random and we'll add it to the project. And then I can go ahead and close out so that when I go ahead and I want to place this new tree, it's going to associate this data with the symbol. And now before I place it, rather, I'm going to have to specify what symbol that I'm going to use to represent this tree. And now you can see all the categories up here that correspond to that file structure we talked about. And look, I have a custom tree section. So you can easily add your own folder, whatever you wanted to call this, whatever you name this folder is what it's going to show up here. So now I have these non-land effects blocks here, and I can go ahead and just choose one and place it. And it's going to ask me to confirm or put in any more details about the data. We can give it a height, for example, and then I can say okay. And now I'll have my own custom block to place. So if you would prefer to use your blocks, you have really a lot of options on how you can do so. You can take our existing blocks and modify them and either keep them in place or rename them to make them your own. You can B, add one block at a time on the fly using the save block tool, or C, you can choose to throw your symbols into our folder structure and either integrate them in the organization that we have, or you can add your own folders. And the same would work for hatches. I don't want to get too far into the weeds on the hatches because we are in the process of overhauling our hatches right now. But if you have custom hatches that you would like to use, the process is going to look very much the same, except you'll be dealing with a .pat file instead of a DWG. So your pattern files are going to land in your land effects folder, and you're either going to put them under patterns or you're going to put them under your hatch tool. So the theory behind that is basically the same. If you want to add your hatch files, you just need your pattern files and you need to know where to put them. Before we move on to start talking about layers and all of that fun stuff, do we have any questions regarding how to work with blocks or work with hatches?
We did have a good question just regarding that teal color 133 in those call outs. And so that was a good one. That's been a more recent change as we've been using that color 133 for the screening in our blocks. And there's a couple ways to account for that, of course, in your CTB. Or failing your CTB in preferences, you can have land effects automatically move it to a different color. But so when we get to the color conversion, it'll be good to definitely mention that.
Actually, that's a perfect segue because that's sort of the next thing we wanted to talk about.
All right, then.
Okay, really quick before we get to that, I just want to touch on some basic layer management stuff. If I type layers or just come over here to my layer property manager, you can see I have quite a few layers in this drawing, and the layers property tab will show you all the properties that are associated with those layers. One really powerful thing that can save you a lot of time is our load and save layer state options. So if you come up here to the FX ribbon, you'll see we have this load layer tool and the save layer tool. This is going to allow you to create or modify layer states that are going to automatically load that layer state into a drawing. So let's say theoretically you took all the time to dial in all your layers, and these are the standard layers that you always want to start with, you can go ahead and use our save layer tool. And what it's going to do is it's going to take all the layers in your current drawing and save them as a layer state. So we can say, for example, if we wanted this layer state to be one of ours, we could call this like default, whatever, 2. You could name it however you'd like. And then it's going to ask you where you'd like to save it. We'll put this one in plans. So let's say that this is going to be our default 2 that we always want to be able to load. We can go ahead and save it here. And then that way, when I open a fresh drawing, I can load my preference set and I can load my layers. I can come up here to load layers and navigate to plans. And here it is right here, default 2. So now if this was a blank drawing, I could just go ahead and load this, and it's going to bring in all of these layers exactly how I had them set. So it can really save you a ton of time. Another cool aspect about this is if you have a drawing and there's no content on a layer and you run the purge command, it's gonna get rid of all those empty layers for you. So if you start a new drawing, load your preference set, load your layers, you get into your workflow a bit, and then you run the purge command, and then you're like, oh man, all my layers are gone. You can just easily reload it. And the beauty of it is it's going to bring all those layers back in, and it's not going to duplicate any of the layers you have active. It's just going to bring in the layers that you purged out. So it's really a powerful tool that can save you a lot of time and just make your life a lot easier. Beyond layers or loading and saving layer states, layers are important for a number of reasons, not just how your drawing looks visually while you're working with it, but also how the system will plot your plan. So all of your layers are going to have settings, color settings that determine the plot thickness of the lines when you go to print. The way that the system does this is it uses a CTB file, which I hope most of you guys are used to, but that's just a color dependent plot style, and it's just going to tell the system how to treat the layers. So if I come over here and I do a print preview, you'll see here I have my option to choose my plot styles. I can switch between CTBs here. So if I do my default land effects CTB, and I can just go ahead and apply this to my layouts. And then here, let me zoom out a bit. If I zoom out and I do that print preview with my land effects CTB, it's going to use the land effects defaults to determine all of these line weights. So you can see here, this is a decent balance of line weights. But when we start modifying our layers, we run the risk of messing all of this up. So if you have a office standard CTB and you don't have the luxury of being able to just use the land effects CTB with the default layers, then there is a process you need to go through to make sure that you don't create a huge headache for yourself. This could seem a little bit tedious, but it's 110% worth it if you're going to be using a different CTB file. So obviously we recommend, if you have the luxury, to just go ahead and use the defaults, because then you don't have to bother with this. But if you want to know how to use your own CTB file effectively, we'll show you how to do that. So what you're going to want to do is come to our website, and if you type, or you come to our website and you go to our resources page, you'll get our search bar. You can type in line color worksheet, and it's gonna bring you up the top results for this knowledge base article. This is gonna give you all of the information about changing your line colors and your block layer colors. If you scroll down here, there's these resources. This one specifically is called the Land Effects Line Color Worksheet. This is gonna be the best way to set up your CTB to work with land effects. So what you can do is download this PDF, and when you open it, it's going to look something like this. Now, quickly before we go on, I've filled this one out already for this demonstration, but these fields will all be blank. And the best way to think about this is it's going to give you all of the land effects default layers, and then their color, and then what thickness that they plot at. So what you want to do is go through one by one, and you want to find any differences between your CTB and the land effects one. So this is comparing yours to the land effects default. Up here, it's going to give you some good instructions on how to read or how to work with this spreadsheet. But essentially what you want to do is you want to see, okay, Land Effects uses color 1 to print at 0.25 millimeters. So if your CTB also uses color 1 to print at that, you can just go ahead and mark it as no conflict. If you don't use that color for that thickness, you can go ahead and mark the conflict box and then put in the color that you do use for that thickness. And what you're going to do is you're going to work your way through this sheet, and then you're going to have all of the differences. Now, if Land Effects uses a color that you don't have to worry about that. You can just go ahead and mark it as no conflict. So that's an easy one to deal with. Once you get this sheet filled out, the hard work is done. Now it's pretty easy. What you want to do is you want to have this sheet handy, and then you want to come over here to CAD. What you want to do is come over here to your preference set again, and definitely make sure you have the correct preference set here. Otherwise, you're going to create a bigger headache than you started with. And then we want to go ahead and use this block layers tool. What this button is going to do is it's going to bring up a new dialog box, and it's going to have every color here in the system. And what you want to do then is just go through one for one along with your sheet and make the changes. So I have a few changes here. Let's go ahead and do those really quick. So we want to change color 1 to color 5. So I can go ahead and select color 1, and I can hit edit, and then I can change the color by clicking this box. And something worth noting is we're using the index colors here, which is just above. So we want to change color 1, which is this red, over to color 5, which is going to be this one. Okay, and then you can leave the line type as default, and then we'll say okay, and then we'll just go through the list. We want our color 3 to be color 20. So careful here, choose number 3, and it's a green color. We want to change that to 20, which is this orange color, and then so on. So we're going to go ahead. We want to change color 5 to 31. And this process might seem tedious because it is a little bit, but it's going to save you so much time down the road. And it's one of those processes that is just, you got to do it once and then you're done. This kind of comes back to the consistency thing we talked about in the slideshow about what makes a good CAD standard is one that you're not changing all the time. Not only for the sake of saving your time and effort when you're working with this kind of thing, but also for the sake of getting to know the standard and building that accuracy. So if you're in here changing your colors all the time because you just want to change them for any reason, you're going to have to remember to do this and make sure that your CTB is also in line. So I've gone here and I've made the changes that correspond with my sheet. I can go ahead and say okay, and what it's going to say or ask me is if I want to make these changes current in this drawing. So what we'll do is once it's done thinking, we'll go ahead and we'll apply the changes to this drawing, and it's going to update all those layer changes that we just set. While this thinks, are there any questions so far?
Oh my, it's been a flurry over here, but I think I'm doing great. I've definitely got everybody answered. But we did have a couple people with the same question. Really nice was just simply regarding layers and layer states. What's the best way to save a certain layer visual state? And that has brought up the whole discussion of, there's a lot you can accomplish from just the layer palette in CAD. But that was just the comment. Maybe when we get back into the layer palette, can kind of point out the layer states and groups and filters that are all available there, because that certainly has evolved over the last decade plus. And so there's a lot of capability just now natively part of CAD. So maybe we can get to that when that's appropriate, but otherwise keep on rolling.
Okay, definitely. So just to recap really quick, we've now made our changes in that dialog box based upon our worksheet, and it's processed and it's asking us if we want to make them current in this file. And of course, we want to go ahead and say yes. So now you can see here, all of my layers have changed based on those settings. So initially, you can see that the colors are all different because we changed them. Now, before we kind of go down the color rabbit hole, if I go back to this print preview and I go to print with my Land Effects CTB, because I made those changes, everything is going to be haywire. You can see some of these lines are thicker than they were, some are thinner, and it just doesn't look right. And that's because we've changed our layer settings. And that's really the beauty of that layer worksheet, is it allows you to go through one by one and make the changes accurately. Um, so now it's important that when we load this preference set that has these new layer settings, we now choose the appropriate CTB file. So we can go ahead and choose our Office CTB from this drop-down menu, and it'll ask us if we want to apply it to the layouts, and we'll say yeah. And if we go ahead and we do the new preview, you can see now things look normal again. If you don't have your Office CTB here in this list, then what you want to do is make sure that you go into your land effects folder here, and you want to make sure it lives in this admin tab. As soon as you put your CTB in here, then you'll see it when you're on the CAD side. So we can go back in now and say, see if our CTB file is in here. If it's not, throw it in the admin file and or the admin folder rather, and it'll show up here. So it's kind of one of those, when you're talking about plot settings and the CTB files, it kind of needs to be approached from two sides. You need to get your layers set up to match your CTB. This is one of those things that if you have the luxury of using land effects defaults, then you just don't have to ever really grapple with it. But if you do need to grapple with it, it's important that you use that worksheet, because otherwise you're just going to be going back and forth layer by layer, and it can really snowball into a headache. But if we open back up our layers here, we can go ahead and take a look at all of the options that you have to work with here. So you've got your layer name, and you can edit that however you'd want on the fly by double clicking. You can freeze and turn on your layers, lock them. You can have different layer plot settings. So you can have layers set to non-plot. That's what this little printer with the X is. And to kind of illustrate that, this layer here for me is on a non-plot layer. This border line is on a non-plot layer. So if I do my print preview here, you'll see that that line does not show up. So non-plot layers are going to be really important to work with as well. And then you just have all of your other standards. You can change your colors here on the fly. You can change the line type, the line weight, the transparency, and these can all add up to really customize your layers. I know one cool thing that we do with some block creation is we throw some layer line types on a semi-transparent layer so that it prints more faint. So if you have like really fine detail, that's really cool. And you can actually see some of these layers here that don't seem to adhere to a standard. And this is actually a layer state that I use often for block creation, because the name in the layer will tell you what kind of block that layer applies to. So like if you see amen here, that's for an amenity, shrub, furniture, and so on. So if I'm going to create a new block, but I'm not sure what kind of block it is yet, I can load these with these X's as the placeholders, and I just need to remember to rename them accordingly. So when we're talking about layers, you really have a ton of customization just from the layer manager here. And so when you're setting up those layer states, it's really important that you have the layers set the way you'd like them, because it doesn't do you any good to have a layer state that you constantly have to edit. If you find yourself always needing to make certain changes every time you load layers, you may as well make the new layer state. Does that kind of address the question a little bit, Jer?
I have to admit, I was not totally following because I was answering a different question, but I'm gonna say I'm sure it does. We can keep going.
Okay. And again, if you ever have questions, you can go to our resources page, and we really have all of this stuff spelled out in great detail with really good documentation. The team works really hard to put together step-by-step instructions with screenshots and visuals and everything. So it really does help. One last thing that I want to talk about before we wrap things up here today is going to be the tool BatchMan. This tool is pretty amazing. It's going to be able to do so much heavy lifting for you. Let's say you have your preference set loaded like we do now, and we've made all these changes to this plan, but now we need to apply a lot of these changes to other drawings. We can use BatchMan to load a single file or add a whole folder of files. We can do this in bulk. So if we wanted to, let's say, take a sample folder, we could come up here, and I have a folder on my desktop that I want to run this on, this folder called BatchMan drawings. I can go okay, and now it's going to put that file path in. And now, however I set this up, it's going to apply those changes directly to, um, it's going to apply those changes directly to all of those drawings. So what I can do here is I can edit all of the layers and colors of those layers with every drawing. It's going to run through the drawings and pull all the layers it sees. So this is great to use if you're getting a batch of drawings from another firm, or you're trying to update some of your old drawings because you changed your standards. It's going to do an audit of all those layers, and it's going to allow you to change them for all of those drawings at once. It's going to run purge plus, which is going to get rid of any of those empty layers that you're not using. And then you can also have it update your text styles. What that's going to do is it's going to run that read command, that REAT. It's going to regenerate all the text in those drawings for you. So it's really quite a powerful tool. And lastly, or not lastly, but here I can also have it set to all by layer. So sometimes you'll have an object that is not set to by layer. It'll go through and make sure that it changes the color of all those lines to the layer that it's on, which can also mess with your plot settings. So this is going to be extra important for taking drawings from someone else. So if you just said okay and you ran it, it'll open up each drawing. It's going to pull all of those layers. It's going to regenerate all of that text for you. And it's going to do so much of the heavy lifting for you within all of the drawings that you have it run on. So once it's done running here, it's going to pull up my layers, and it's going to show me all the layers that it found, and I'm able to change them here on the fly. So as you can see, I can rename them, I can change their color, I can even load and save layers here. So I'm able to really have control of the layers across multiple drawings. It's really powerful. And then at that point, a lot of the heavy lifting would be done. You could just go through and update your labels and give them a once over, and then they would be updated. So when it comes to working with many drawings or drawings from another office, BatchMan is going to be a very critical tool. And honestly, we could do a whole hour on just BatchMan and how powerful it is. But it's definitely one of those tools that lends itself to the adaptability that we were talking about in the beginning. You want your standard to be adaptable. BatchMan will really foster that adaptability, allow you to quickly change a lot of drawings, whether they're your own or someone else's. And just to kind of make one more final comment about the preference sets, everything we did was to change the settings of this specific preference set that we called new office standard. And you can go ahead and change all of these settings for multiple preference sets if you needed to do so. For example, let's say you have a client you work with frequently and they only accept drawings within a specific standard. You could create a preference set and a layer state and everything we talked about today for that client, so that you can just send them drawings that are already to their standard, and it's just going to make you look more professional. So there's really a lot of power in these preference sets. You just need to always be really careful when you're working with them and managing them, because you don't want to accidentally change something and then mess someone else up. um, are there any other questions about BatchMan or preference sets?
Just one last question we did get from a couple of people was just, regarding, well, how does everyone in the office, access all this custom content? And just saying how important it is to have that single land effects folder that everybody is connected to. We recommend using Dropbox or Google Drive, something like that, which will, not only make it easy to have every team member connected to that same land effects folder in real time across any distance, right? But it'll also back all that up instantly over the cloud, so it's just a really, really great thing. If you don't have a Dropbox account these days, go and get one. Just in general, because of course it's a very inexpensive, fantastic thing to have. at your disposal, and it's just a natural fit for land effects. So just a huge shout out for doing that. Some people will fall into that trap of installing land effects separately on every machine, and so everybody's looking at a different land effects folder. There's a lot to be gained by following our KBs to switch to a single shared land effects folder that everybody's connected to.
Right. That's a very good point. I kind of touched on it, but I didn't really elaborate much. My land effects folder is on my local disk. What Jared was saying is if this lives in a Dropbox location, then everyone in your office can access it. And then you just want to be mindful that when you're making changes in that scenario, whether it be to the preference set or a block, you're making those changes for everyone. So kind of back to the consistency thing, you want to be mindful of how you're making these changes. And you can also use those options to in your preference set to control who can make those changes. So if you want to keep it as read write only, or just read only, you can do that, and that'll help you avoid some of those unintended mistakes at times. But I think that kind of fills our time talking about generally a top high level look at CAD standards and kind of how you can implement a new standard on a plan. Um, Thanks everyone for coming. If there's any last minute questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Yeah, for sure. Exactly, everyone. And definitely keep us posted, for what you want to hear, because obviously these webinars are created as we hear from you what sort of subjects we need to cover. Just one last thing, since we're still on that subject, Steve just chimed in saying, if land effects is on a server in the office, it's already mapped as an X drive. So that's great. He already has that. How would we change that to a Dropbox location? And just in short, you can just reach out to us, of course, and we'll send you the KB. Or if you find the KB on our website, it's pretty easy. It's just, moving the land effects folder. But basically, you're just going to pick it up and move it, and then you just run the workstation installer on each machine to affect that change. It goes pretty quick and easy, but we're happy to help you out with, because that's what our technicians here do that all the time, and we're very good and very fast at just helping you with giving you the video and the documentation to help you with that. It's a very simple change to do. The main thing is just we just don't recommend a few of those shared online providers. For instance, just the OneDrive, Microsoft OneDrive, we've had the most issues with. So unfortunately, we just say please don't use that. Dropbox and Google Drive both work great. We've got webinars and power tips and KBs on that subject. If you can't find them on the website, just shoot us a quick email or a phone call, and we'll send that to you. But on that note, hey everyone, it is weekend time. Time to get some lunch, time to enjoy the beautiful weather. Have a great time, and we will see you next webinar.